Here is the thing that makes people feel like they are losing their minds. You did everything right. You got the job. You show up every day. You do not blow your money on stupid things. You budget. You try. And at the end of the month, after rent comes out of your account, you look at what is left and you think, how is this possible? How is it possible that a one-bedroom apartment in a mid-sized American city costs more than what your parents paid for their entire mortgage? And the really weird part is not just that rent is high. Lots of things are expensive. The weird part is that rent is high and it keeps going higher. And nobody in charge seems to think that is a problem. In fact, a lot of people are making very good money precisely because your rent is that high. So today, we are going to break this whole thing open. Let me set the scene. Imagine a caveman. Simple guy, lives in a cave. One day, he realizes he can trade some animal skins for a spot in a nicer cave, one with better shade and fewer bugs. Fair trade. He gives something, he gets something. Both sides walk away happy. That is how shelter was supposed to work. You contribute something to the group, and in return, you get a safe, dry place to sleep. Simple. Now, fast forward a few thousand years. That same basic idea, trading your labor for a roof, has turned into a system so complicated, so stacked, so tangled up with corporate money and tax law and zoning codes and algorithmic pricing that the average American worker now spends more than 30% of their income just to keep a roof over their head. Some spend 40, some spend 50, and the cave is not even that nice. So the core question today is this. Why does rent in America feel impossible now? Not 10 years ago, not in the future, right now. What happened? Who benefits? And why does it feel like the system is working against regular people? Let us get into it.
The first thing you need to understand is that rent did not just go up because of inflation. People love to say that. Oh, everything is more expensive now. Eggs are more expensive. Gas is more expensive. Rent is just part of it. But that explanation is lazy, and it hides what is actually going on. Yes, inflation is real, but rent has outpaced inflation for decades. Between 2001 and 2023, the median rent in the United States roughly doubled. Meanwhile, median wages went up, but not by nearly as much. So even if you were making more money on paper, your rent was eating a bigger and bigger piece of the pie every single year. That gap between what you earn and what your rent costs did not happen by accident. It happened because of specific choices made by specific people and institutions. And if you understand those choices, the whole picture starts to make a lot more sense. Let us start with supply. This is the part that sounds boring, but is actually the root of almost everything. America does not build enough housing, period. For decades, we have been falling behind on the number of homes and apartments this country needs. Estimates vary, but most serious analysts put the national housing shortage somewhere between 3 and 7 million units. That is not a small gap. That is a crisis-level gap, and it did not just happen overnight. After the 2008 financial crash, home building collapsed. Developers went bankrupt. Construction workers left the industry. Banks stopped lending for new projects. And it took years, almost a full decade, for building to recover to pre-crash levels. During that time, the population kept growing. People kept forming households. Immigrants arrived. Young people moved out of their parents' homes. Demand kept climbing while supply sat still. And when demand outpaces supply, prices go up. That is not complicated. Even our caveman understands that. If there are 10 caves and 20 families, somebody is going to pay more to get in.
But here's where it gets more interesting. It is not just that we stopped building. It is that in many places we made it almost illegal to build. Zoning laws in cities and suburbs across America restrict what kind of housing can go where. In huge portions of Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York suburbs, Austin, Nashville, and dozens of other high-demand areas, the land is zoned exclusively for single-family homes. That means you cannot build an apartment building. You cannot build a duplex. You cannot even add a second small unit to your own property in a lot of cases. And who supports these zoning restrictions? Often it is the people who already own homes. They show up to city council meetings. They fight new development. They say it will ruin the character of the neighborhood, or increase traffic, or lower property values. And local politicians listen to them because homeowners vote. Renters, on average, do not show up to those meetings. So the rules get written to protect the people who already got in, and the door gets shut on everyone else. Now let us talk about what happened during and after the pandemic, because that is when things went from bad to absurd. When COVID hit, something strange happened in the housing market. Interest rates dropped to historic lows. People who were stuck inside their apartments suddenly wanted more space. Remote work meant people could live anywhere, and a massive wave of migration happened inside the country. People left expensive cities like New York and San Francisco and moved to places like Boise, Phoenix, Tampa, Raleigh, and Nashville. And what happened in those cities? Demand exploded. But the housing supply in those places was not built to handle that many new people that fast. So rents spiked. In some Sunbelt cities, rents jumped 20, 30, even 40% in a single year. Landlords realized they could charge more because people were desperate and competing for the same units. And they did charge more.
A lot more. But it was not just individual landlords raising prices. This is where the story gets darker. During this same period, large institutional investors started buying up rental properties at an unprecedented scale. We are talking about private equity firms, real estate investment trusts, and corporate landlords. Companies like Blackstone, Invitation Homes, and American Homes for Rent went on massive buying sprees, purchasing tens of thousands of single-family homes, often paying cash, often outbidding regular families who were trying to buy their first home. These corporations were not buying homes to live in. They were buying them to rent out. And when a corporation owns thousands of units in a market, it has enormous power to set prices. It does not need to be generous. It does not need to care about the community. It answers to shareholders, and shareholders want returns. Now, on top of that, something even more troubling came to light. There is a company called RealPage. RealPage makes software that landlords and property managers use to set rent prices. And here is how it works. Landlords feed their data into the system: occupancy rates, local market conditions, competitor pricing, and the software spits out a recommended rent price. Sounds efficient, right? Except multiple landlords in the same market are all using the same software, which means they are all, in effect, coordinating their prices through a shared algorithm. They are not sitting in a room together saying, "Let us all raise rent by 15%. But the result is functionally the same. Prices go up in lockstep. Tenants have nowhere to turn because every comparable unit in the area is priced by the same system. Several lawsuits have been filed arguing that this is essentially price fixing. And whether or not courts ultimately agree, the effect on renters is real. You go apartment hunting, and every place is somehow the same ridiculous price. And now you know one of the reasons why.
Let us zoom out for a second and think about what all of this means for regular people. Because the numbers tell one story, but the human impact is something else entirely. When rent takes up 40 or 50% of your income, everything else in your life gets squeezed. You cannot save for emergencies. You cannot invest. You cannot pay down debt. You definitely cannot save for a down payment on a house, which is ironic because the reason you are renting in the first place is that you cannot afford to buy. It is a trap. And it is a trap that disproportionately hits young people, people of color, single parents, and anyone living in a major metro area. The psychological weight of it is enormous. There is a constant low-level stress that comes from knowing you are one bad month away from not making rent, one medical bill, one car repair, one layoff, and you are in crisis. That is not a healthy way to live. And millions of Americans are living exactly like that right now. Our caveman would look at this and be completely confused. "You are telling me," he would say, "that your people built the tallest buildings in the world, put a robot on Mars, and invented a glowing rectangle that can answer any question instantly, but you cannot figure out how to give everyone a dry place to sleep without it costing half of everything they earn. What kind of tribe does that?" And honestly, that is a fair question, because the resources exist, the land exists, the construction technology exists, the money exists. What does not exist is the political will to prioritize housing as a basic need, rather than treating it purely as an investment vehicle. And that is really the deep tension at the center of this whole issue.
In America, housing serves two purposes that are fundamentally in conflict. On one hand, a home is where you live. It is shelter. It is stability. It is safety. On the other hand, a home is an asset. It is an investment. It is the primary way most American families build wealth. And those two purposes pull in opposite directions. If you want housing to be affordable, prices need to stay low, or at least stable. But if you want housing to be a great investment, prices need to go up. You cannot have both. And for decades, American policy has overwhelmingly favored the investment side. Tax breaks for homeowners, zoning laws that restrict supply and push values up, mortgage interest deductions, favorable treatment for real estate investors. The entire system is designed to make property values rise, which is great if you already own property, and terrible if you do not. So what can actually be done about this? That is the part where people usually throw up their hands and say, the system is broken and nothing will change. But that is not entirely true. There are real solutions. They are just politically difficult. First, we need to build more housing, a lot more. And that means reforming zoning laws at the local and state level to allow denser construction. Some states are already doing this. Oregon, California, and Minnesota have all passed laws in recent years that reduce single-family zoning restrictions and allow more multi-unit housing. It is a slow process, but it is happening. Second, we need to rethink how we treat corporate ownership of residential housing. There are proposals in Congress right now that would limit the ability of large institutional investors to buy up single-family homes. Whether those proposals go far enough is debatable, but the conversation is happening. Third, we need stronger tenant protections, rent stabilization policies, limits on no-cause evictions, and transparency requirements for algorithmic pricing tools like RealPage. Some cities and states are moving in this direction. Others are moving the opposite way. It depends a lot on where you live. And fourth, we need to invest in affordable housing construction directly. The federal government used to do this much more aggressively. Public housing, subsidized development, voucher programs. Those programs still exist but are dramatically underfunded compared to the scale of the problem. None of these solutions are magic. None of them will fix the rent crisis overnight. But together, they represent a path toward a housing market that works for more people, not just the people who already own the most. The key thing to understand is that this is not a natural disaster. High rent is not like a hurricane that just showed up and there is nothing anyone can do. It is the result of policy choices, market incentives, and power dynamics that can be changed if enough people demand it. Let me bring it back to something personal. If you are watching this and you are struggling with rent right now, I want you to know something. It is not your fault. You are not bad with money. You are not lazy. You are not failing. You are operating inside a system that was set up to extract as much from you as possible while giving back as little as it can get away with. The caveman would not have tolerated this. If the strongest guy in the tribe took all the good caves and charged everyone else half their food just to sleep somewhere, the tribe would have dealt with that guy pretty quickly. We have more sophisticated tools now. We have votes. We have voices. We have the ability to organize, to show up at city council meetings, to support candidates who actually prioritize housing, and to demand better from the people who write the rules. The rent crisis in America is not a mystery. It is a series of decisions that benefited some people at the expense of others. The shortage is real. The corporate takeover is real. The algorithmic price coordination is real. The zoning gridlock is real. And all of it together creates a situation where working people are paying more and more for less and less. But understanding the problem is the first step to changing it. And if enough people understand how this works, the conversation starts to shift. So here is the final thought. Shelter is the oldest human need. Before money, before jobs, before governments, before any of this, there was a person looking for a safe place to rest. That need has not changed. What has changed is how many layers of profit and policy and complexity we have stacked on top of it. And somewhere underneath all of those layers, the basic deal is still simple.
You contribute to your community, you deserve a place to live. We just need to build a system that actually delivers on that deal. Because right now, for a lot of Americans, it does not. And that is not just an economic problem. That is a human one.